Toff, nuff, woof. Cute little toffel waffle. Yes, you are such a cute little toffel waffle. Huh.
What? How did this get here? We don't even own a tape recorder.
I guess they really do turn up all on their own. Well, that's convenient. Statement of Neitshayd, who claims to be an undead demon.
And Cecilia, who claims to have been a witch in her previous life.
Regarding the horror podcast, the Magnus archives. Statement taken directly from subjects, 19th of August 2023. Or is it statement given directly by subjects? After all, we don't have the archivist here to take it from us. We're doing it all of our own accord.
So I guess we are giving a statement.
Yeah, either way, dear audience, if you haven't listened to the Magnus archives before, do it. Do it right now. And then come back to this episode.
They will probably have forgotten about this episode by then.
True, but worth it if they listen to the entirety of this particular horror podcast. So worth it. I am so excited for this one. So very excited. Alright, so the way we've structured this, or I structured this because I made most notes, we've got the 14 dread entities, and most of our notes on characters and relationships and plot and lots of plot falls under those 14. Not all of it, but most of it. The eye and the web got most of it for obvious reasons. There's also a few additional topics like audio aspects, voice acting, soundscaping, and so on, and obviously, as expected, the diversity section. And we're starting with our personal thoughts of the fears, and then get into the first half of Smirke's 14, and then diversity and JonMartin and LonelyEyes, very important for this episode. And then next episode, we will cover the editing and other important things like Magnus Institute dress code, very important, and of course the other half of Smirke's 14. You know, this is finally an episode where I'll do most of the talking, while you, Cecilia, just nod along. I'm honestly surprised it took so long.
Yeah. When we first came up with the idea, I really thought that you'd like 2/3 of the talking and that I would basically just comment on what you say and add my own 2 pennies.
Yeah.
Maybe we should also mention content warnings. Like, it's a horror podcast, so it is to be expected. So we are gonna talk a lot about elements that can be found within the horror genre, so be prepared.
That may be true, but the content of our discussions aren't in any way more graphic than what we usually talk about. 13 Reasons Why aside. So I don't think specific warnings are necessary. Like, I'm just my usual bloodthirsty self, and you're just your usual Hufflepuffy self, and like... So yeah, I'm not gonna put in any content warnings. Not sorry. Anyway, so... Let me look at my notes. Yeah. The very first episode, Magnus 001, Anglerfish, is one that stayed with me for a very long time, because it's like... I mean, it's the introduction, obviously. It just shows you this is a quiet horror. And this episode is a bit special because I listened to it in the evening, and like I said, it stayed with me for a while. Although I can't say I was ever quite truly afraid. And after the first night listening to this podcast, I got comfortable. It was cozy to listen to in the evening before bed, and it was nice to listen to on the way wherever.
Yeah, well, I listened to it before going to bed too.
Were you afraid?
I've never had a problem with watching or listening to horror before bed.
Yeah, but were you afraid?
Well, that one episode? Definitely yes.
Alright, I'll accept that. Alright, so the Magnus archives. is quite possibly the most listened to horror podcast in the entire world.
Yeah, the Magnus Archives and the people behind it have won a lot of Audioverse awards for 3 years in a row, actually. And as much as I don't really care much about some awards, these are very much deserved. The podcast is just amazing. It has amazing characters and an amazing story.
And amazing editing, and amazing soundscaping, and amazing music, and everything is amazing. Amazing.
Yes.
Did you know there's a Magnus Archives 2 with 3 additional seasons planned? It's apparently going to be called the Magnus Protocol.
Cool.
So, Johnny will... Well, he will return Jonathan Sims, the real person, the one who voices John Sims, the archivist, the one who wrote the entire Magnus archive script, mostly. So, Johnny will return as lead writer, but there will be multiple guest writers. The Kickstarter has raised a lot of money and unlocked, it seems, 3 seasons made of 30 episodes each, epilogues for each season, a lot of guest writers, multiple double-length episodes, a UK live tour, and other bonus content. So we can all look forward to quite a lot of stuff.
Gimme! I want.
Yes, so do I. According to the Kickstarter, they have already begun recording, and episode 1 is set to be released in October 2023, so this year.
Oh, I'm so looking forward to that.
Alright, let me read the summary for you. The Magnus Institute was an organization dedicated to academic research into the esoteric and the paranormal, based out of Manchester, England. It burned to the ground in 1999. There were no survivors. Now, almost 25 years later, Alice and Sam, a pair of low-level civil service workers, at the underfunded Office of Incident Assessment and Response, have stumbled across its legacy. A legacy that will put them in grave danger. And to quote Alex and Johnny, it's gonna be so bad for them and it's gonna be pretty horrible. Because of course it's a horror podcast.
Yes,
even though the summary doesn't quite sound horror-y, but horror podcast. Oh. It's sort of a sidecore. Not exactly a sequel, but it does take place in the Magnus in the Magnus universe. And yeah, it's gonna be canon.
Ooh, canon.
Take note of the year 1999. I will just leave that here and not comment on it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so much for introducing this and news and whatnot. Let's talk about Interwoven Anthology plots at Night Vale. First note I have is the name thing. I already touched on that, the Jonathan Sims name thing, because the voice actor for John and the lead writer is called Jonathan Sims, and our protagonist is called Jonathan Sims. And John is gonna be the character, and Johnny the, well, real-life person, I suppose. As much as anyone can be real.
Yeah.
The Magnus Archives wasn't originally meant to have a metaplot, just an anthology series, and when Alex, the director, said, let's do a metaplot, Johnny went, sure, why not, and didn't change the protagonist's name, and he has regretted it ever since. Gonna make my first comparison to Night Vale here. The protagonist of Welcome to Night Vale, which is also a horror podcast, kind of. I'll explain that later. It's called Cecil. And his voice actor is also called Cecil. And originally, fans assumed that they would share the same name. Like the voice actor is called Cecil Baldwin. But it is later revealed that the character's name, Cecil, is Cecil Gershwin Palmer. So it's not exactly the same. I'm sure they did that on purpose. They probably also originally went the same route as Johnny. And then decided, no, let's not give them the exact same name.
Yeah,
but I'm not
probably
sure
for the better.
Yes. Yeah, Welcome to Night Vale is a lovely podcast. It's a twice-monthly, still-running podcast about the community radio of the desert town of Night Vale, with lots of humor and horror and overall oddities that the people of Night Vale think are perfectly normal. For example, there is no such thing as mountains. Mountains do not exist. The weather is a song during which any current crisis is usually resolved, and there's an Eldritch Abomination cat. which is like the most important part.
Mm.
Horror cat.
Yes.
It's fun. You can technically tune in wherever you want. I mean, there's some continuation subplots, but the meta is not on Magnus archive level, so if you don't want to start from the beginning, just click on any episode. Also, fanfiction writers will know what I mean. We die like radio interns / we die like archival assistants. Okay, on to the actual part of this topic. So, Magnus Archives is very interwoven, so to say. It's like we've got lots of names to return. I mean, Brecken and Hope appear as early as episode 2. The Not Them comes up in episode 3. Jürgen Leitner in episode 4. It's like lots of big shots right at the start. Even the anglerfish from episode 1 comes up later. Episode 26 has Michael the Distortion and Robert Smirke and Martin spotting the first double warm around the archive, and then Georgie is mentioned in episode 28 by Melanie. Actually, I wonder if John recognized her or thought the name was a coincidence. Anyway, and she later plays a major role, so lots of important names right in the beginning of season 1 when you don't even really have a meta yet. Like season 1 starts out with just the way it was intended in an Anthology series. And John picking on Martin, poor Martin. And then it slowly starts picking up speed and we get a meta plot and stuff happens. But yeah. Still, for the most part, you got the statements. Most of them are standalone statements in a way, but there is a meta that connects them all. So, not all names obviously return, but a considerable amount. Usually the odd, strange, creepy people in the form of avatars like Sarah Baldwin and Jared Hopworth. Sometimes the one that got spooked getting involved in the whole mess like Melanie and Helen. But yeah, generally the statement givers don't exactly return. It's more the creepy people. It's really fascinating.
Yeah, like the planning that must have gone into the series is so incredible. Like the avatars and artifacts we see right at the beginning are all relevant later down the line. It's all connected. Even if at first the statements don't seem to have any connection at all, they are in fact all connected.
Yes, even the Admiral, a cat, plays a minor but important role. Cat. Very important. Most important character of them all.
Yes, indeed. The cat is the most important character of them all.
I know Johnny had some rough outline of sorts. He knew the ending going into this and developed the plot further as the seasons went on. But he mostly came up with the episodes themselves on the spot, didn't he? I mean, of course, he had like a collection of ideas and stories, but he wrote the episodes on the spot and he took ideas he had collected, perhaps bringing back characters because just because they fit right in, and it's marvelous. Of course, the anthology format and the supernatural horror aspect help immensely with making that work, but it's still impressive how the end result is just such a complex story that has barely any plot holes at all. The foreshadowing and mysteries and all, well, I can't really say much on the topic because I love spoilers, but let's take Elias being Jonah, for example. It's according to the season 4 Q&A that one specifically paid off very well. They got the balance between people having guessed correctly and others being completely blindsided. Right. Like I said, I spoiled it myself, so. Or, no, wait, I think that one specifically. No, that one I actually guessed because by that point I was listening along as they were released. But most of the twists I spoiled for myself. Anyway. Also something, while we're on the topic of Jonah Elias, the villain monologue was very impressive because they used it for recontextualization. It was more, so this thing that happened actually fits in this context, instead of what you sometimes, or what you often get with villain monologues, which is like, so this thing that happens fits the twist because of this new piece of information that didn't exist before, and that's not good writing. But the way Jonah reveals all that happened, and it's like, yeah, let's put it in new context. But there's no new information to make it fit. It just fits because that's what it always was. That's really good. So yeah. I think also it's a bit interesting how the trailers generally are extra scenes that don't appear within an episode. Because usually when you get trailers for something, it's like snippets of what you will later see, but Magnus Archive trailers are just completely unique content.
They're special.
Anyway. Alright, little plot overview. Season 1. We establish the Magnus Institute as an institution with the characters, main characters, antagonists, and so on. Also the fears, even though we don't know what they are yet. And while Jon seems very skeptical of statements, he seems to have encountered some Leitner books during his time as a researcher and verified their power for himself, which very interesting because like Jon is super skeptical, right? And you're like, yeah, seems normal. But whenever Leitner comes up, he's like, yeah, I totally believe that. And I was like, huh. Of course, having listened to the entire show, we know the reason for season 1, Jon's extreme skepticism. Like, he's actually aware of the truth. He knows those statements are real. The ones that have to be recorded on tape. Of course, not the fakes. And he's just scared. Which, actually, let me quote him here. Can I do a Jon voice? I don't think so. I'll try. Because I'm scared, Martin. Because when I record these statements, it feels like I'm being watched. Actually, take note of that. He feels being watched. Wonder why. And then he says, I lose myself a bit. And then when I come back, it's like if I admit that there may be any truth to it, whatever's watching will know somehow. The skepticism. Feigning ignorance. Just felt safer. I love that explanation.
Yeah.
So yeah, season 1 ends with the attack from Chained Prentice, putting an effective end to Jon's exaggerated skepticism. And then in season 2, the skepticism makes way for paranoia. Also, season 1 has a secret tunnel. Secret tunnel. I couldn't help myself. Need to make an Avatar reference here.
Yes, of course.
Yes. Yeah, that's basically it. Season 2 ends with the brutal pipe murder of one Jürgen Leitner before he can give Jon and the audience too much information.
Yes, it's just like, can't just have the info dump too early on. So we need a brutal pipe murder.
Season 3 is about Jon getting more marks for Eliza's collection, or Jonah's collection, I should say. Slowly coming into his powers as the Archivist, capital A, and trying to stop the world from ending with a ragtag group of people who can barely stand each other. Season 3 ends with a literal explosion.
It went boom.
Quite. Season 4 is about dealing with the fallout and apocalypses and becoming capital B and wanting to run away together. And season 4 ends with an apocalyptic event. Whoops.
Whoopsie.
Season 5 is a literal apocalypse. Also, season 5 has different cover art.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I noticed when I scrolled through Spotify.
Well, it is fitting because apocalypse.
Yes. Actually, yes. Okay. Because I can't do all the talking, little question. Did you have theories while listening as the episodes were released, Cecilia? Did you speculate? Did you realize what was going on? Did you figure out what the fears were? Actually, I think I nudged you in the direction of the last one, didn't I? I think I had you compile a list or something.
Yeah, I remember that you got me to listen to this podcast. You had your theories very early on, and that you then wanted to know, like, you regularly asked me, have you figured it out yet? And most of the time I went, no, I haven't, not yet.
Yes, I remember.
Yeah. Like, you figured it out pretty early on, and I took my sweet time, you know? But when I figured it out, that there were entities, like I immediately told you every time I figured one of them out. But, well, it is expected from you that you would figure it out way earlier than me. Like, you are not human and have more trains of thought than any human I know. And I doubt there are a lot of humans who are as intelligent as you are. So, yes, you will figure it out very early on and with the help of spoilers, I guess.
Thank you for
So,
the compliment.
yeah, you're welcome. It's like, yeah, of course you figured it out way before I did, but I got there eventually, you know. So if you want to find out the mystery by yourself and why all the seemingly ridiculous and nonsensical statements at the beginning do in fact make sense and did happen like that, you're like, you know what to do. Give the podcast a listen, figure it out, and then come back to this episode.
Although I hope that people have already done that when we first said that at the beginning.
Yes, I hope so as well. But can't hurt to say it again.
I couldn't have formed too many theories completely on my own for the early parts because I clicked through the wiki and read through Tumblr, as one does, while listening to season 1 and season 3, I think, was the one airing at the time. I remember the apartment I was living on when I listened to Anglerfish, so it must have been 2019, which... Yep, season 3. So yeah, I spoiled myself up to season 3 during season 1, 2, 3, whatever. Don't remember how long it took me to catch up, but it was either before season 4 began airing or during early season 4. So seasons 4 and 5 I was without spoilers. I listened as it was released. Yeah. Basically for seasons 1 to 3, my theories were based off of the spoilers I knew, I think. I don't remember it all that well. And I know I figured some stuff out based on tidbits and then read the confirmation. And for others, I just found the outright spoiler. But for seasons 4 and 5, I obviously formed my own theories as each episode was released. And here you are indeed quite right, Cecilia. That I was generally faster in solving mysteries and predicting how everything would go down compared to you and most others. Like the Jonah reveal, I was not surprised by that. I felt vindicated. But I mean, there were so many hints for that. Anyway, I think I have some notes on that should be part 2 of this discussion. Anyway, so, Smirke's 14. Ready?
Mm-hmm.
What fear from Smirke's 14 would be your worst, and which one would you be an avatar of, Cecilia? The dark for the first? Or the lonely, combined with the worst?
Which one would I be most afraid of? Well, there's this one episode we'll talk about later.
The buried.
Yes. And I would be an avatar of the lonely, probably.
Alright, for me, the worst corruption, I think. I don't like insects, or spiders, or worms, or slugs. Snails are fine though. And, well, an avatar of the end. Obviously. One of its deaths, perhaps? Taking the lives of others, playing games? Sounds nice.
Yeah, would be fitting.
I mean, my favorite statements are about the end. Usually, especially deaths. Like that soldier who cheated against the monk. He's the first one we got. Then my note tells me the other one was called Nathaniel Thorpe. And the mummy trapped in an ancient tomb. I really liked that one.
Well, the mummy episode confused me when I listened to it. But in hindsight, it all made sense.
Everything does.
Yeah.
I mean, I also really like the lonely and the dark and the eye and the slaughter. The end, obviously. I like the web except for the spider part. And the extinction is neat, I think. What I'm not comfortable with is the corruption. And the flesh is complicated. Very complicated. And then buried and vast I'm indifferent about. Desolation, hunt, stranger, spiral. Oh wait, I think the spiral could be fun. Okay, I like the spiral.
Yes, the spiral could be really fun. And what other entities like? Yeah, the dark, the lonely, the eye. I don't like being watched, but I like watching other people. So those are all nice, all very, very nice. Corruption is just disgusting, but not really scary. Desolation is fine. And since the hunt is only about the chase, it's fine as well. Well, the end will claim us all. The flesh, the web, all neutral, I would say. The stranger can be scary. The slaughter is horrible, with exceptions for some TV shows and stuff. And the buried. Yeah, and the vast goes both ways. Like it can be beautiful, but it can also be really, really scary.
So I like a lot of the dread entities, and you feel neutral about most of them.
Yep.
Also, something I noticed, I like all of the avatars, I think. Honestly, this might be one of the few, if not the only show where I like almost all characters. Usually I hate at least the protagonist, but not this one. I really like all of these characters. Okay, not a fan of Tim, to be honest, but everyone else, love them. The avatars in particular, but the less monstery humans too. I love them all.
Yeah, that is really rare for you. Like that alone shows our audience how special the Magnus archive is.
Yes, very special. I mean, we almost made 3 episodes out of this. Instead, we're gonna go with 2 very long ones.
Mm-hmm.
Although, I mean, since I do most of the talking and I talk really fast, who knows how long they end up being. Anyway, something, well, I didn't notice it until Johnny pointed it out in a Q&A. There is no sexual violence in the Magnus archives. Although you could say the dude who had worm sex might count. Timothy Hodge had sex with a woman who got attacked by chain branders and that exploded into worms and yeah. I appreciate it a lot that there's no sexual violence. As Alex put it, it's trauma versus horror.
And didn't that worm guy burn the house down?
Yes, we have a note about that under the corruption, which I'm not keen on talking about, but okay. Yes. Smirks 14. I will quote Jared quoting some book, I think. Robert Smirke divided the beings into 14 distinct powers, each comprising a variety of smaller terrors, some direct and practical, and some more abstract. We basically got 2 explanations, or, well, John got 2 explanations of the dread entities. Leitner and, well, Jürgen Leitner and Jared Key. Comparing them is quite interesting, because Leitner describes them in a Lovecraftian horror way, whereas Jared uses a color wheel analogy. Which I found interesting, but both explanations are very neat.
Yes.
Also, I couldn't help myself, I had to put this in here. When Johnny talks to Jared and he goes like, statement of Jared Key, deceased, regarding the death of his mother, Mary Key. Statement taken posthumously from subject, June 13th, 2017. It was funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's take a statement from a dead person.
We're gonna take a statement from the dead because that's not weird at all. No.
Also, Jared's voice in that episode had very interesting effects. There is a sort of echo to his voice sometimes. Anyway, also it took us 111 episodes to get there.
Yeah, and by that time, even I had figured out the entities.
I mean, Leitner already told us a lot in Magnus 080.
Yes, but I'm not sure whether I had figured out all 14 by episode 80.
Okay, another mini quote from Jared, where he says, they don't feed on it, they are it. They are our fear. And Jared is right, of course, with his color wheel. Compared to Leitner. Leitner's like, yeah, we've got these Lovecraftian horrors. And Jared is like, yeah, but they are not distinct from each other. The fears all blend together. They are like colors. Some blending into each other, others clashing horribly. Like orange and violet, my brain tells me. Brain told me, put this example there. Orange and violet clash horribly. Which is fitting. I like violet and I hate orange.
And I'm told orange and green, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
clash horribly, and I never understood that.
they do.
No.
Orange is a horrible color, so it's understandable. Anyway. Another quote. I have so many quotes in here. An infinite amorphous blob of terror bleeding out in every direction dwarfs. Nice. And I'm like, thank you, Jared, for this comprehensive list of 14. Yes. Also, something else he mentions is like that feeling that something somewhere is letting you suffer just so it can watch is exactly what John will involuntarily do during his coma. Okay. The corruption.
Filth, the crawling rot.
Yes, the fear of filth, disease, insects, disgust, rot, decay, infection. That feeling of your skin crawling or itching, being touched by something that might burrow inside you, swarming and hollowing you out, leaving you full of holes. Reminds me a bit of like if you have touch aversion and then you add being trapped in a body of flesh and bone when you're not meant to be bound to a physical 3D shape. Fuck. Also, love, toxicity, and obsession, being part of a group turning from good to rotten. Ritual for this one is unknown. This is the first of the dread entities that we see John getting marked by. Or listen to. It's not the first mark he receives, of course. That would be this web, and then the second one the eye, but the first one we listen to live. In Magnus episode 039, Infestation, he gets the mark by his decision to grab the tape recorder when it was totally unnecessary to do so. And then even deeper when LonelyEyes decides to wait with activating the fire suppression system just to make sure that John really got marked by the corruption.
Yes, just to make sure.
Very important.
Now, imagine exploding into a mess of flesh, thick black fluid and worms. Doesn't sound very pleasant if you ask me. But I don't know if I would have set the flat on fire and run out into the cold. Like, as extreme as the situation was, that was a bit too extreme.
I'd have burned it to the ground like, ugh, icky worms. Bah, nah, nah, burn it to the ground.
Burn, butcher, burn. Oh,
Yes.
well, I would have gotten out of the house, but burn it down? I'm not sure about that. Like, there must be so many valuable possessions inside. Imagine Toffee were inside that house. Would you have still burned it down?
I would have gotten Toffee with me, of course, and then burned it down.
Okay, then you are allowed to burn the house down when Toffee is safe outside. Yeah, I'm not a fan of the corruption of this entity. Like, worm infestations are unpleasant and disgusting. But it's more that to me than horror, I would say. Like, it can be horrifying, but there's worse for me. And in early production, some aspects of this entity were considered separate, actually, but ended up together, mushed together in one entity. And maybe that's for the better. Who knows? Like, we already have so many entities to keep track of, anyways.
Wriggling worms and crawling insects and mold and rot and decay and crawling insects.
Aren't you also really uncomfortable around spiders? More so than bugs, I would say.
Spiders. Yeah, but not what the web stands for, because I like manipulation.
Of course you do.
It's some days seeing a spider makes me shudder in revulsion and wish to be very, very far away. Certain types of spiders more than others. Other days I'm fine. I mean, there's one living on the ceiling right above my pillow, and it's been there since we moved in. Or a spider has been living there for years now anyway. Probably not the same one. How long do spiders live anyway? 2 to 20 years according to Google. Huh. Anyway. Also, centipedes are worse than spiders. Centipedes are also venomous. which should be a plus point, but it's centipedes. And I hate silverfish and earwigs and ticks. Ticks are horrible. Ticks also belong to the arachnids. Wait, does that make ticks part of the web? Is it spiders or arachnids? If it's the latter, I take everything back. But yeah, generally, it's not the corruption part, the rot and disease, it's the insects. Most things that don't have a skeleton, so most invertebrates. Like insects and centipedes and spiders and worms and leeches and whatnot. I think the word I'm looking for seems to be arthropods, though that doesn't include worms and leeches. And then, if you take like snails, jellyfish, starfish, and whatever, the plural of octopuses, those are fine. Which actually, those are things that live in the sea. Huh.
Not all snails.
Well, true. Not all snails live in the sea. Do you like slugs, Cecilia?
No, I do not.
Yeah, me neither.
And what about caterpillars?
As long as I don't have to touch them, I guess they are fine. Same for butterflies and moths. Like, butterflies and moths are very beautiful, but please do not touch me. Please don't.
Oh, wait. Yeah, I brought some caterpillars home once and you didn't run screaming.
I never run screaming.
But you come close to it whenever there's a, how did you put it? A certain type of spider.
I mean, duh. Next, the spiral.
The twisting deceit. Es mentiras? It is lie. It is not what it is.
The fear of madness. That worry that your world isn't right, that your mind is lying to you. Ritual is the great twisting. Ah yes, the distortion, part of the spiral, stabs John in Magnus 042, the new door, because John annoyed it. Spiral mark acquired. And I mean, John enters the corridors multiple times, of course.
Yeah. Like, the spiral is, am I going mad? Or not? Is this right? Is my mind lying to me? Like, am I being deceived or lied to? Am I hallucinating? Am I still sane? This geometry doesn't seem possible. Why are there so many doors? Like, this is like a maze. Wait, have I been here before? Am I going mad? And now, imagine you're just a normal archival assistant, and then your boss sacrifices you to stop a ritual. And then you are a mystical door. You can replace other doors, be under a solid surface, or just be there with no other structure attached. You're just a door that is there. And it's like, you can just trap silly humans into a maze they will never get out of and watch as they slowly go crazy. Could be a TV show. Sounds like the type of trash TV that people would watch. Like, the distortion even gets a domain in the post change, and it's called the distortion, and takes the form of a hotel. Is the hotel named? If not, can we name it Hotel Oblivion? Or we just leave it as is because John just destroys it anyways.
Honestly, Micah and Helen are such a delight every single time they appear. Literally every single time. Like, I made so many notes when going through the episodes that just said, I like Helen. Also, Helen at one point says, the only personhood I have is from someone I ate, and I'm like, relatable. Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, you get that.
Yes, you mentioned the distortions domain. This one appears in Magnus 187, checking out. The episode made me, come on, John, don't do it to evade the spiders, do it for Helen. I love this episode. I especially enjoy Helen interrupting the statement every now and then. And a little quote from this one, what lurks behind a smile? Is a friendship true, or is it reaching out with hands that cut you?
Yeah, and then you also have like Dr. David, who convinces you that your legitimate mental health problems are made up to gain attention.
That would be Magnus 177.
Yeah.
Wonderland. So 10 episodes before Alan's Domain.
Yeah. And it's like, it's a real problem in society. Like people doing stuff for attention and then legitimate problems get downplayed because of these people. Like those people should embrace the lonely and just be done with it, if you ask me. Like, but I don't think people in the post change are just allowed to change domains.
They are indeed not. That would defeat the purpose.
Sad.
The stranger.
I do not know you.
The unknown. The uncanny. That kind of creeping sense that something's not right. That guy you saw that might be following you might mean you harm. Ritual is called the unknowing. The first ritual we encounter right at the end of season 3. And the first and only ritual Jon is heavily involved in thwarting before, well, the Watcher's Crown happens.
Yeah, it's the first one we meet, the first entity. Like they are part of the first, the second, and the third statement. But in statement 2, together with the buried and in episode 3 with the web, it's like the creature we meet in episode 1 kidnaps you and uses your skin and body for new purposes. Well, that sounds a bit scary, doesn't it? Like, imagine someone else is wearing your skin and someone recognizes your flesh prison and is wondering what the bloody hell you're doing. Like,
Fun.
yeah, and I'm just like, the not them sounds a bit scary. Like, no one would notice that someone replaced you. It's like,
one person would
scary.
notice. One person would notice.
Yeah, I suppose one person would. But
Fun. Fun, fun.
There is a reason we are taught as children not to talk to strangers.
And that reason is called the anglerfish.
Yeah, you never know if a stranger is really human or not. Like, you have a feeling that something is off, but don't know what. Like our Toffee is pretending to be a real cat, even though she isn't. You can only see it on occasion when her control slips a little bit and her sharp teeth start to show.
Vampire teeth.
Yes, like a true hunter.
You mentioned the not them. Did you notice Sasha's voice actor changing between Magnus 039 and 040 when the not them takes over? I sure didn't.
Well, when I first listened to it, I definitely didn't. But when re-listening to them, like I noticed a very slight change. So, but admittedly, I knew that the change was coming, so I listened specifically for it. So it was easier for me to spot, knowing that it happened.
Apparently, there was a scheduling conflict with Sasha's voice actress. Or voice actor? I'm not sure on that gender. Sasha's VA. And that is why she fell victim to the not them instead of Tim. Listening to those specific episodes now, it's actually really obvious, for me at least, not only the voice, but also the way the two of them speak, Sasha and not Sasha. It's very distinct from each other. I don't know whether I would have figured it out on my own because I obviously came across spoilers at some point.
Yeah.
But yeah. In Magnus episode 040, Jon mentions the specific tapes that went missing. And if you were to look up which ones those are, that alone is a very huge hint because they are, of course, all the tapes the real Sasha was recorded on. And tapes don't change when the not them takes over.
Mm-hmm.
There are also several mentions of not Sasha making technology malfunction in season 2. Another huge hint. Generally, the not them are, well, an integral part of season 2. It's interesting that Melanie would be the one to remember. One person who knows. And then when we're finally getting more details on the not them towards the end of season 2, we also get a mention of the stranger as one of the entities. I mean, the end was also mentioned before, but Jon didn't know what the dread entities at that specific point were. He didn't know about them. And of course, the stranger's mark on John in the form of not Sasha stabbing John just before season 2 ends.
Yes, there was some nice stab.
But those are not the only strangers, of course. We also got a mannequin, ringleader, ringmaster, and circus, and a being called Nikola Olsinov. I have a little note here which says it's kind of funny when you think about it. John was being held hostage for a month by the stranger. Although I wonder why he didn't start without statements. And his captors made him go through a proper skin care routine during that entire time.
Well, they wanted his skin to be perfect.
Indeed. It's like, yep. Mm-hmm. John's, when he comes back, it's like, yes, my skin has never been better.
Yep. That's right. What happens when you get captured for a month. You come back with the best skin you ever had.
Okay, Magnus 119, Stranger and Stranger. The Unknowing is in full swing. This one has lovely intro music. It's very different compared to other episodes, and this music pervades the entire episode. The Unknowing is truly interesting. These episodes, when you listen to them, also very confusing, hard to keep track of oneself. Very fitting, very well written, also, and good directing and sound editing and whatnot. And my last note on The Stranger is about the duality / codependency of Bricken and Hope, because that is something I also found very interesting. These two avatars are, well, they're not avatars, these two beings are one entity, but it's a duality.
Yes, it's a duality. I have some more notes, like, where would you rather be post-change? The not them domain, where you go around as one of many riders with no sense of self, a center for well-being where they will treat your wellness, or a labyrinth of masks. Like, for me, it's like labyrinth would imply I can get out again, so that might not be too bad. But riding a horse sounds nice, at least as long as you can't feel pain. I wouldn't care about the strangers that ride with me, really, but would I know that I lost my sense of self, is the question.
It's a merry-go-round. Merry-go-round.
Yes, it's a merry-go-round.
I would have a domain of my own to look after, so... Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And what I found interesting is that Stranger is actually the entity with the most episodes. And it's like, huh, who would have thought? And we also have the House of Rex in Great Yarmouth, or however you pronounce that, as a location. And the real life thing is apparently infamous for being the worst Rex museum. That the figures barely look who they are supposed to be and being horrifying to look at overall.
I read about that.
I wonder where.
The Desolation.
The lightless flame. The torturing flame. The devastation. The blackened earth. The ravening burn. Asa.
The fear of pain. Fear of loss. Fear of unthinking or cruel destruction. Fear of burning. Rituals called the Scarred Earth. John got himself marked by the Desolation all on his own in season 2. How did he even find Jude Perry? Also very important for John to be told that he actually has powers of his own, and it's easy to figure out how they work just from listening to Jude's reaction. That was lovely. Also, I love Jude. I think most of my liking her is due to the voice acting. Gorgeous voice acting.
Burning and loss and destruction are all painful, but do I fear it? Like, not much. Like, loss, destruction, and pain are all part of life, as are happiness and gain. So I don't have a particular connection to this entity.
Something I noticed. Gertrude Robinson, former archivist, seems to really like using arson to solve problems. So perhaps the eye wasn't the correct entity for her. In Magnus episode 145, Infectious Doubts, Gertrude talks to Arthur Nolan, former leader of the Cult of the Lightless Flame, and she even admits herself that her preference for arson and explosives and bringing devastation to the Desolation's cult would have made her a fine avatar of the Desolation.
Yeah, she really would have been. But no, she got to be part of the Eye.
The Vast.
The Falling Titan. The Awful Deep.
Vertigo. The fear of falling. Agoraphobia. The dread of deep water for our own significance before the universe.
Like the buried, it can manifest as water, but I think underwater would be the buried for me. And when I'm on a ship out in the ocean, I would think of the vast.
Ritual is called the Awful Deep.
Well, we are insignificant in this universe, so I get this entity. Like, humans are just tiny little beings who want to be important. So some fear losing themselves into vast space. It's like they fear height, falling, open spaces. The voices are strong with this one. And then with Ex Altoria, which is a lightner, it tells a story about people of a town just jumping off a cliff in the face of a creature that is about to destroy the town. The voices are very strong with this one.
Very loud voices.
Mhm.
One of the avatars is Simon Fairchild, and I was like, oh Simon, I didn't know how much I missed you until your episode came around again in season 4. Simon is the person who strolls into a room and goes, I could kill every single one of you, but would you like to have a cup of tea first? He's like, tea, cake, and the occasional murder.
Yeah.
That was the doorbell. We
Yes.
are going to ignore the doorbell.
Mm-hmm.
He's so old. He's seen and done it all. He's just having fun at this point.
Yeah,
I love him.
like, of course you do. Like, so Simon Fairchild's domain post-change as a huge creature made of people clinging to each other. Like, how are the people at the bottom not crushed by the weight of the ones on top? Like, or are they dead and rigor mortis has set in and that is how they can continue to cling to each other?
I don't think gravity matters much when the Vast is involved.
And in contrast to the Lucas family, the Fairchilds assume the name Fairchild and are not required to marry spooky singles. They can just steal identities.
Which is interesting, because the Vast aligned people wouldn't have as much of a hard time producing biological children as lonely aligned people.
Yeah.
So this one is another season 2 mark for Jon, right after he got his hand burned. Because Desolation wasn't enough. Jon, you idiot. Don't go around getting yourself almost killed and marked by avatars of different eldritch horrors. Honestly. Also, hello, Daisy. Lovely of you to give him another mark. On the same day even.
Poor Jon.
It's his own damn fault.
Still. Poor Jon.
So, the hunt is obviously the next. This one's mainly animals, mostly. Being hunted, chased, being prey. Ritual is called the Ever Chase.
Oh, very fitting.
This one's mark is from Daisy almost slitting Jon's throat. Yeah, we got the Desolation, Vast, and Hunt all in quick succession.
Mm-hmm. Are all serial killers related to the hunt?
Depends on their mode of operation, I think. Like, the hunt is all about the chase. So the killing itself would be more end or slaughter territory. Yeah, so it depends how they go about their business.
I suppose so. Yeah, the hunt is so straightforward. Being chased, being prey, being hunted. But aren't we all prey at the end of the day? Prey for all these money-obsessed corporations?
Eh? Money?
Just because you don't have to worry about that doesn't mean the rest of us don't have to either.
If you say so.
Yes, I do say so. And hunters are very dangerous for other entities because they can injure and just kill other avatars through conventional means, like with knives, guns, and even their bare hands. And because of that, other entities try to get hunters on their side.
Not sure about that actually, because avatars are really hard to kill. The hunt isn't about the killing.
Yeah, but usually avatars can't be killed by normal means, but hunters can hurt them with a regular knife.
I guess.
Yes, you guess. And then you have also police officers like Daisy Toner, and they are especially prone to the hunt. I mean, their job is to sometimes hunt people down, so I suppose it comes with the job, the association to the hunt.
Oh yes, Daisy is such an interesting character. Also, as I read one point, I think during season 4 was like, if the hunt takes her again, which is after she came out of the buried and kind of... Well, Daisy didn't lose her collection, she just refused to go on hunts. And Basira puts it, if the hunt takes her again, we don't know if she's coming back. Neither of us want that. And I'm like, foreshadowing.
Foreshadowing. And yeah, the hunt is also supposedly the first fear, and other entities later split off.
Maybe, but I think the end is older. And the dog is also quite old.
I suppose they're old, but it's like what humanity fears. I suppose being chased by wild animals?
No, I mean, the hunt came from animals, but the end is also something animals fear, isn't it?
True.
Most living beings fear the end, but we're not talking about the end. During the apocalypse, Magnus episodes 190 and 191 I wrote down. There's a place full of cats. Cats have a domain. We need to go there, Cecilia. Like, I'd visit my darlings too, just like Georgie, my lovely kitties. Also, I want my cat back. It's a very, very valid reason for wanting to end the apocalypse.
Yes, of course we need to go there. And do the cats chase humans as their prey?
Probably. At the end.
Death. Terminus. The termination of all life.
The coming end that waits for all and cannot be ignored. One of the oldest, together with the dark. And the hunt, I suppose. The fear of death, uncaring and unstoppable. Everything has to end eventually. Also, the end will be the last entity to remain when all other entities are gone, and will itself eventually die. No ritual needed. The one thing almost all living beings fear. Is that why I don't fear death? Because I'm not alive?
But you were before, right?
I mean, I must have been. Otherwise I wouldn't have died. It's all a bit murky, to be honest. Well, dead things cannot die, so I suppose I was alive once.
Yeah. And as we discussed in a previous episode, I do not fear death, but I do not wish to die because of the people who care about me. That's the main reason, at least.
But do you fear you don't fear death, but do you fear dying? The process of getting there?
I mean, I wouldn't really be a fan of it if it were long and painful and a lot of suffering. Then I would be like, oh gosh, when can this finally end? But if it's like rather fast and not much painful, then I would be, yeah, this is fine. This is fine. At least for me, it's fine. Not necessarily for the people who care about me, but I would be like, yeah, sucks for them. Sucks for them. Anyways, the end. It is rather passive because it simply doesn't need to do anything. death will claim us all in the end. And in line with the passiveness is also the fact that there is no known ritual because it is simply not necessary. It also doesn't really have a connection with other entities because there is no need for that.
Mm-hmm. Funnily enough, there's a lot of dead people popping up here and there as if they never died. Of course, most of those are avatars and dying as... well, I think that doesn't really happen or it happens, but it doesn't stick. It's also dying is kind of one of the requirements to really become an avatar, it seems. More the choice, really, than the actual being dead part. Like, death is just the catalyst for a very important decision.
Like Trevor Herbert?
Yeah, definitely died in the archives. No, what do you mean he's still running around?
No, definitely
So yeah,
dead.
Death, the first step to becoming, capital B. We're now Magnus, episode 121, season 4, beginning of season 4. Well, technically not the first step, and technically you don't actually need to die, according to Johnny. The decision to become is what's important. Either way, this one's another mark of one of the entities for our archivist by, well, he got himself blown up. Also, this one, we finally personally meet Oliver, who previously also made a statement, but we meet him in this one. Hello, servant of the end. Also, Oliver outright is like, yeah, the web sent me here. Like, someone's pulling the strings.
Yeah.
I like Oliver. So, John makes his choice between this episode and the next, and we already see an immediate change because he immediately knew about the statement Basira brought him. And this is when John starts calling himself the Archivist, capital A. And yeah, it's like last statement he made before his death. It was still head Archivist of the Magnus Institute. And then he dies, and then it's just the Archivist. Also, poor Martin. Poor Martin.
Oh,
yeah,
Martin.
Oliver is lovely in all of his statements. His domain is also quite interesting. That would be Magnus 168. And that one was, it's like, Martin, are you jealous? This is so funny. I actually realized that before John, and it's so funny. And then John goes like, look, Martin, I'm sorry you feel that way, but I'm not killing a man. I'm not going to kill a man just because you're jealous. And Martin's like, why not? Yeah, I know. And then, please. I mean, John does not kill Oliver. Thank goodness. I like Oliver, but also, Oliver is he hits the nail on the head when he's like, this new world of fear reviles death as a release, but the coming end cannot exist without its reality. Which means eventually there won't be anyone left to feed on, and the red gods will starve to nothingness. The web later, Annabelle Kane later mentions that as well. Anyway, Oliver is so cool. So, that was the end. And this is where we end the first chapter of Smirke's routine and move on to other topics. 7 dread entities down. The other 7 will have to wait until next week. Diversity. To which I have to say, Ace Rep. Ooh, yes. Johnny boy. Ace Rep from our lovely Johnny boy.
Wrong Johnny boy, though.
Well, actually, someone in the Magnus Archives calls John Johnny Boy at some point. And just because we'd already nicknamed Song of Ice and Fires, or well, in Cecilia's case, Game of Thrones, I guess, Jon Snow, Johnny Boy, before we got into Magnus Archives, doesn't mean the nickname's taken. So Johnny Boy it is.
I suppose.
Let's take a step out of universe for a moment. I know that some of the voice actors are genderqueer, the VAs for Georgie and Basira, for example, but I haven't gone out of my way to do research on their gender identities and orientations. I do know, though, that in one of the Q&As, Julia Talks, VA notes that she's queer. They're queer. Don't know their gender. Need to be careful about gendering. Anyway, yeah, so it's like we got some genderqueer people and possibly a lot of just queer in their orientation. Labels. Not straight people. There we go. Oh no, wait. I think it's not cis-het straight people. See, it's complicated. There are so many boxes you humans have.
Yeah,
Anyway.
humans have a lot of boxes.
What I wanted to say, we have a diverse cast for voice actors. So, back to the universe. What I've gathered from the season 4 Q&A is that Johnny didn't plan for the Archivist to be Ace from the beginning. It was just sort of a headcanon that came naturally as things progressed. It wasn't planned, it just felt right. Same as the romance arc with Martin. That one was also not planned because, well, it's a horror story, not a romance story. To that point, people had to explicitly ask whether John returns Martin's romantic feelings after the finale of season 4, which is understandable because Magnus 159, the last, was a bit ambitious about that, but it's perfectly understandable that Jonathan feelings are hard Sims would be an emotional mess to write. But yeah, it was intended as a romance at that point, for season 5 especially, but also fine to read as platonic or other. Also, no one is ever kissing in Magnus Archives, except for that finale kiss. Like, we got one kiss, and I appreciate that. It's the reasons, obviously, audio-only kisses sound horrible, but it just... I appreciate that. No kissing.
I appreciate it too.
Yes. Only one kiss at the very end, and that's it. Wait. Are all main characters of the Magnus Archives gay? Like, John is Ace, obviously, and definitely bi-romantic or pan-romantic, because he dated Georgie and Martin. Tim is definitely bi/pan. In Magnus 049, John goes, apparently Tim is involved with both with one of the young ladies there at the police, as well as the gentleman who manages the other shift. And I'm like, nice one, Tim. Yes, nice one.
Mm-hmm.
Martin is, well, either gay or bi/pan. Same for Melanie. Georgie is definitely bi or pan. And, I mean, Basira and Daisy are totally girlfriends. Whether it be platonic or romantic or sexual or otherwise. On that note, Johnny said in regards to the relationship, quote, there's never going to be an explicit textual clarification for that. And said that they're partners in the us and them sense, and quote, the idea of having your back against a world that is believed rightly or wrongly to be hostile to you. So for Basira and Daisy, it's not about the romance aspect. They're not protecting each other and doing morally questionable things out of romantic love. They could totally be in love. They could also not. There could be anything. It's up to us as the audience. They're doing it because they're partners. Still, there were quite a few moments with those two where my mind just went, girlfriend. And you can't tell me Elias and Peter Lucas aren't fucking. And also, I know that is a quote I also wrote down somewhere else. Anyway. Gertrude strikes me as too busy for this shit. Sasha we have known long enough, and the Admiral is a cat. And that leaves, well, the avatars, who generally give me the outside of human labels vibes, Michael especially.
So, everyone is gay.
Yes, everyone is gay. I actually noticed, thanks to the statements being read by John, or Martin in later seasons, occasionally others, most statement givers are gender neutral in my mind. Like, or no, just neutral in general. Like, no defined gender or nationality, even if their names are specific or towns and countries mentioned and such, it's just neutral. Like stranger. You don't know them, you live their fear through them. Although that is not exactly true, because they do all have distinct personalities, at least to a degree. Each statement is unique not only in regards to the events described, but also the way the statement giver talks. They all have their own voices. Still, I sometimes listen to one of the episodes or read one of the transcripts, and someone from a previous statement is mentioned, and I'm surprised because I generally didn't remember the ECD person was a man.
And at the beginning, I always assigned the statement givers a gender, just subconsciously, but I was wrong several times, and eventually my mind stopped doing that thankfully.
I've written down quite a few examples of people. Well, this is mostly LGBT stuff. Was it nationalities? Oh, well. Anyway, so the guy from Magnus 150, Cool Desac, who had this lovely intro statement that I put somewhere in my notes, The Lonely, I believe, was together with another man for like 15 years. I got the impression that they were married even. The same-sex marriage was technically, I think, not legal most of those 15 years. That's a recent thing, isn't it? Anyway. Then we got the statement giver for Magnus 110, Creature Feature. That one is trans. And that one's, it's mentioned in the statement, but it's so easily overlooked, even though it did have a huge impact on their life when they were outed. Same with Magnus 083, Drawing a Blank, the mannequin murder statement. This one's not LGBT, but it features dwarfism, and it's fascinating because the statement giver does mention a condition, as her superiors put it, but she doesn't exactly specify what it is. We only get that post statement from John's supplement. And it's there. Also, the typical ableism of people in power is there, both the higher ups and customers, with all their rudeness and stupidity and fake pity. It's not really a big deal, not for the statement, but it's also realistic. And the Magnus Archives does this a lot, with different types of issues that society tends to have. They're there. They're part of the statements. It's clear that they are issues. They're not hidden away or swept under the rug. But the show doesn't make a big deal of them. I mean, that's not what the Magnus Archives is about in the end. It's a horror show. So it all feels very natural.
Yeah, unlike 13 Reasons Why, I don't even mind that everyone in this show seems to be gay. Like,
Because
it's just natural.
Yes, it doesn't feel forced.
Yes, everything is perfectly natural here. The supernatural beings aside. Do you think the mannequins we all see in like shopping centers all secretly belong to the stranger?
It's possible.
Oh gosh.
Also, episode 150, The Cost of Living. A statement I personally like because, of course, I do. It's associated with the end. I mean, the statement giver basically kills others to survive their own not-so-near-death experiences. John kind of switches between calling the statement giver with she, her pronouns and using they, them pronouns. So we're assuming there's that this person also. Yeah. As far as ethnicity goes, apart from what a name might imply or directly stated locations, appearances are mostly entirely left up to us listeners, with only some really vague descriptions here and there. So, like, anyone could be anything, technically. So, yeah, I mean, of course, a name or a town mentioned could imply something, but there's no real confirmation either way for, like, 90%, 99% maybe even, of the episodes. Johnny and Rusty Quill have tried, and still do try, to be very considerate and inclusive to the best of their abilities. So, like I said, we don't know people's nationalities. We don't know what they look like for the most part, or even what they identify as, or any of the many labels and boxes you humans like to use so much. So, it's just normal. It's so normal you do not notice it all until you go looking for it. And even then, it's normal. Magnus Archives is so inclusive and considerate, and problems aren't disregarded. They don't shy away from those issues, but they don't make a big thing out of them. It's people are people first, fear second, and everything else after. It's representation in a way that doesn't feel like representation, because it isn't in your face, and it isn't hyped up, and it isn't a big deal, and it just feels so natural, integrated, and at the same time quite realistic.
It kind of reminds me of The Sandman.
It's actually even better than The Sandman, I'd argue. Though it's hard to compare the two as, well, one is a supernatural horror podcast, and the other is a fantasy TV series that lost the horror of the supernatural horror comic it is based on. So two very different media types and all that. Anyway, all of that is unimportant because Jon is confirmed as ace, and that is all that matters. Jon is ace. Jon reads as ace, listens as ace. Wait. Well, he reads as ace / listens as ace. It's not a big deal, and no one felt the need to have to explain what it means, and it's all comfortable on Jon's ace.
Mhm.
Also, he's still friends with his ex-girlfriend, and they have a cat. Like, what more could I possibly want?
Nothing.
Ace rip, ace rip, ace rip. Yes, 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 yes. Ah, I'm so happy. I am so happy.
Me too.
Okay. Before we end this episode, I have 2 relationships I want to discuss. First, JonMartin. Ah, poor Martin. Called useless right in episode 1. And Jon will continue to speak ill of him throughout the season. It actually starts in the launch trailer. It's in the launch trailer, Jon goes like, I swear, if he's brought another dog in here, I'm going to peel him, which is a bit funny, actually. The dog situation was explained in one of the live shows, by the way. It's available on the Magnus Archives feed. But yeah, Jon is really, the way he speaks about Martin during season 1 is really derisive. Like, wow, Jon.
Yeah.
Rude. Poor Martin.
Rude.
Also, Jon's from Bournemouth. I lived there for a little while, like 2 months or so. Has beautiful sand beaches with palm trees and all. It's in South England. Very nice during the summer.
So another place you will have to take me to.
Yeah. Did you notice Martin's crush before his co-workers teased him about it? Because I was positively surprised when I read the spoilers. I was kind of able to see, or rather hear it then, but at the same time, not really. But I suppose I don't notice such things unless the signs are so obvious they're metaphorically wrecking me over the head.
I got some vibes. So I wasn't really that surprised when it got revealed. When he got teased.
I was totally blindsided by the spoiler. Not by the episode. Also, Martin is a poet. His poetry was mentioned in season 1, then again at the end of season 2, and I believe that there's also Patreon content from the Magnus Archives. And 2 or 3 bonus episodes we got for free. Also, very interesting that it's Martin Jon reaches out to and none of the others after having been kidnapped by Nicola Olsen for a month in Magnus 101. Though I suppose, well, Tim's a bit unhinged these days, and Melanie is a condensed ball of anger, but Bazira would have been an option. Because until that point, we hadn't really seen much of Jon caring about Martin, only ever the other way around. Yeah, okay, so the episode, it's Magnus 106, A Matter of Perspective, where Martin's crush is confirmed, in the form of Melanie and Bazira gossiping. Also, Jon being ace confirmed in that episode. Then we got 129, Submerged, where a very important conversation between Jon and Martin happens, where we see they do care about each other. This is season 4, where, well, Jon was in a coma, Martin is with Peter Lucas, so yeah, Jon misses Martin. He's lonely. And Martin, on the other hand, is trying to protect Jon and preventing Jon from dying again by following Peter's instructions. It's a very heartfelt conversation.
Cute.
Then we get 139, Chosen. Another one where we see that Jon really does care a lot about Martin, growing over him, trusting him, needing him to be okay. Which is quite the contrast to the way season 1 Jon acted. And we know, of course, that Martin cares about Jon just as much, making their separation rather hard. And then we get Magnus episode 142. 142. Scrutiny, which is like, oh, Martin, he really does care a lot. Even though he seems so distant in season 4 for, well, obvious reasons. We get all these little snippets of Martin trying his best to make sure Jon will be okay. And then Jon goes and eats live statements, and it's clear that he's changing, losing his humanity, sort of, and Martin... I'll just quote him here. He goes, it's... what? Addiction? Instinct? Maybe mind control? Something like that? I can't believe he'd choose to do something like that. No, I can't think like that, though. I can't let myself, because if he's already gone, then all of this is just... And he cuts off there. And I'm like, woo. Yes, so Martin is doing it for Jon. Also in Magnus 149, Georgie mentions to Martin that Jon used to go on about you a lot. And I'm like, see, Martin, that was last season. He really does care about you.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, we get 154 Bloody Mary. The first thing Jon does after finding out how to quit is to go to Martin and ask him to run away together. Cute. This is so bittersweet. It's such a painful conversation. I love it. It's so painful. Go and listen to it.
You shouldn't be delighted about that. It's heartbreaking.
It's awesome. Also, of course, can't leave this out. Magnus 159, the last. Obviously, because, aww, Jon's and Martin's reunion is so sweet. Look, Martin, I murdered Peter for you. Martin, I need you. Martin, please. Martin, look at me.
You make him sound like an excited puppy.
Yes, that's Jon. And then Magnus 160, the eye opens, where it's like Martin and Jon all on their own in Scotland for however long they were there, being domestic before it all went down to hell. All went to hell. With cows. Good cows. They were happy. Can you believe it? In a horror podcast. Oh my goodness.
Oh no, happy people in a horror podcast.
Oh
that
no.
needs to change. Let's bring about the apocalypse.
Yeah, it's like this episode starts with happy people, so you already know everything has to go to shit.
Yeah.
I like that we get a lot of JonMartin interaction in season 5. I mean, statements are cool, of course. Statements are what this episode is about. This podcast, I mean. This podcast is about, but Jon and Martin. The entire season is a bit different compared to the others. I mean, the whole apocalypse thing gives Johnny and Co more freedom and all, and it's nice. I wouldn't say I prefer it over the other seasons necessarily. I think 4 might be my favorite season, actually. But it's very enjoyable. It's interesting to see how Jon and Martin's relationship fares during a literal apocalypse, with one of them being an avatar. I mean, technically both, but Jon's deeper down than Martin is. And then later on they will have arguments, and they will try their best to communicate, and it isn't easy with the world being what it is and Jon being what he is and all. I like the complexity, the conflict, the sweetness despite it all. They're basically attached at the hip during the season, with the exception of Martin's and Helen's domains. I mean, a little bit of separation can't hurt. The other Martin mentioned that too. And then when Jon goes off on his own at the end. It's quite the hurdles for a fresh relationship that they have to face. An entire apocalypse and sacrificing yourself for everyone else and all that. In Magnus episode 167, Curiosity, Jon talks about Gertrude and that she wouldn't have made it without a reason, a purpose, something to ground her and keep her going. And Jon goes, yes, Martin, you are my reason. Which like, oh, sweet. Also, hypothetically, who would be on top? Martin, right? So the ship name should technically be Martin Jon. Hypothetically, of course, because Jon feels like the type of asexual who just wouldn't do sex. Like, Jon is the type of asexual I can absolutely very much relate to. It's comforting. And Martin would go, well, he could go either way, honestly. Somewhere on the A spectrum, or an allosexual with really obscure kinks. Maybe into bondage.
Maybe Grey?
Grey and into bondage. Anyway, something I just have to mention. In episode 169, Fire Escape, Martin slaps the archivist. Which, that's literally what the transcript says. So I had to put that in. Martin slaps the archivist.
Martin slaps the archivist.
And then, of course, the season 5 finale happens. Moving on!
Wait, you're just going to skip over all the pain?
Yep.
Okay.
I mean, obviously that will be covered in next episode, so LonelyEyes, aka Murder Husbands. A ship name that technically also is applicable to JonMartin. By the way, I drew a little bit of fan art for John and Martin. Nothing special, just John with a few too many eyes and your standard Martin. I might put that on the Patreon if I ever get around to making one. Anyway, so, Elias and Lucas. Elias and Lucas just have this energy of two ancient gays that keep fighting for divorce every year or so. Divorce? Well, the voice actors say divorce, so I suppose divorce it is.
Divorce it is.
So I didn't actually bother getting evidence and examples from the show for this one, but I do have these bits from Rusty Quill Gaming and Giving, 2018, 19, 20. These were Christmas live screams.
Yes. These were Christmas live screams. They just screamed into the microphones.
Christmas live streams, where people submitted some lines for Ben to read as Elias. Ben is the voice actor for Elias. And there's this bit in 2019 where he goes, Peter, you have embarrassed me at the annual Institute holiday party for the last time. I want another divorce. And Peter, you are insufferable. I want another divorce.
I want another divorce.
Yeah, it's pretty infamous in fandom circles. Yeah, also there's a bunch of lines about divorces from... I said divorce again. Divorces. From Alistair. The voice of Peter Lucas in the Rusty Quill Gaming and Giving 2020. So yeah, it's like listen to those streams and you get some really fun lines from Elias and Peter. Also, yeah, there's a line where Peter and Elias adopt Martin. Very fun. There's a Reddit post out there that details it all. Just Google Peter Elias divorce and you will get the Reddit post. Someone was nice and put all the links to and timestamps there. So, yeah. Also, very important, in one of the season 5 commentaries, the episode somewhere during the end of actually season 4 must be season 4 commentary. Sorry, season 4 commentary. So the Peter says in the episode, "I'm looking for Elias Bouchard," and Alistair comments like, "I'm looking for my husband."
So, yeah, they are totally fucking.
Definitely, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Statement ends, I suppose.
Where is Toffee?
Join us next week for the Magnus Institute dress code.
Where is Toffee?
She'll be back, don't worry.
I will hold you to that. Okay. And until next week episodes, where we hopefully get our Toffee darling back, you can find us on Twitter. Our handle is @TNToffies, and we are also on Spotify for those YouTube watchers.
And we're on YouTube, obviously, @TNToffies.
And if you enjoyed this episode, leave us a comment. What is your personal relationship with the fears?
Which dread entity do you like the most, and which makes you the most uncomfortable?
Afraid, you mean?
Yeah, that.
And then like, subscribe, hit the notification bell.
And we will see you all next week for the Magnus Institute dress code. Bye!
Bye! And for the return of a Toffee.